Diego Silva was 28 years old and had spent the last 5 years working as a delivery driver. His red motorcycle, a Honda CG 160 already worn by time and miles traveled, was his faithful companion on the busy streets of São Paulo. On that September day, the heat was scorching and the traffic more congested than usual. Last delivery of the day, Diego murmured, checking the address on the app. Jardine Street, 847, Oliveira Mansion. Upscale neighborhood again, he thought, accelerating toward the Jardins district. What Diego didn't know was that this delivery would change not just his day, but his entire life. The mansion was imposing, high walls, wrought iron gate, perfectly manicured gardens. Diego parked his motorcycle in front and checked the order. Medications from a compounding pharmacy. Expensive medicines, he observed, looking at the bottles in his thermal bag. He rang the doorbell and waited. Moments later, a female voice came through the intercom. "Who is it?" "Delivery from Central Pharmacy for Mrs. Beatriz Oliveira," Diego replied, approaching the speaker. "You can come in. The gate will open." Diego pushed his motorcycle to the main entrance. The door opened before he even rang the bell, revealing an elegant woman of about 45 years old. Perfectly arranged blonde hair, expensive clothes, gleaming jewelry. But there was something cold in her gaze. "Are you Marina Oliveira?" Diego asked, checking the name on the app. "I am. Have my mother's medications arrived?" Diego nodded and took the bottles from his bag. "There are 4 different medications. I need you to check and sign here." Marina took the bottles without much interest and quickly signed on Diego's phone screen. "Thank you," she said, already preparing to close the door. But Diego hesitated. There was something strange about this delivery. He had enough experience to know that medications from compounding pharmacies were usually delivered directly to the patient, not to third parties. And from the names on the labels, they seemed to be heavy medications. "Excuse the question," Diego said, "but are these medications for continuous use? I noticed they're quite specific." Marina frowned, irritated. "It's for my mother. She has health problems." "Why are you asking?" "Oh no, sorry. It's just that sometimes pharmacists ask us to explain the dosage directly to the patient, but if you already know, I know perfectly well how to administer my mother's medications." Marina cut him off curtly. "Thank you for the delivery," and she slammed the door. Diego stood there for a few seconds. Something bothered him deeply, but he couldn't identify what it was. He put away his phone and headed to his motorcycle when he heard agitated voices coming from inside the mansion. "Needs to sign today, Mother. We can't wait any longer. The doctor said her condition will only get worse. It's for your own good." Diego stopped. The voices came from a half-open window on the ground floor. He shouldn't be listening, but something in that conversation put him on alert. "I don't understand why I have to sign this now, Marina," said a weak and trembling voice. "I still feel confused with these new medicines." "Mother, we've already explained. It's just a power of attorney for Ricardo and me to take care of your business while you recover." Diego felt a chill in his stomach. Power of attorney? And why did the elderly woman's voice sound so fragile, so lost? Diego should have left. He should have started his motorcycle and headed to the next delivery. But something kept him there, hidden behind one of the cars parked in the garage, listening to the conversation coming from the living room. "Mrs. Beatriz," said a male voice, probably Ricardo, "you need to trust us. We're your children." "But I can't see these papers properly," replied the fragile voice. "Since I started taking these new medicines, my vision has gotten much worse, and my memory isn't good either." "That's exactly why you need to sign," Marina insisted. "While you can't take care of business, we'll take care of it. It's temporary." Diego frowned. Something was very wrong here. He remembered the medications he had just delivered. One of them, if his memory served him right, was used to treat glaucoma, but in high doses could cause vision problems. Another seemed to be a strong sedative. "Mother, please, just sign," Ricardo said impatiently. "We're wasting time." "It's just that I'd like to talk to Dr. Henrique first. He's always helped me with these important decisions." "Dr. Henrique is traveling, Mother. Remember? We already told you that." Diego noticed the tension in Marina's voice. There was a lie in those words. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching the window. Quickly, he hid better behind the car. Marina appeared at the window, looking outside with a suspicious expression. "Is someone out there?" Ricardo asked. "No, it must have been the wind," Marina replied, closing the window. Diego breathed a sigh of relief, but he knew he couldn't stay there much longer. He needed more information. He decided to walk around the property, trying to find another way to observe what was happening. At the back of the house, he found a service area with a low window. Through it, he could see part of the living room where the conversation was taking place. And what he saw shocked him. Mrs. Beatriz was sitting in an armchair, clearly disoriented. Her movements were slow, her speech slurred. In her trembling hands, she held a pen, while Marina held a pile of documents. "You just need to sign here, Mother," Marina said, pointing to a spot on the paper. "It's very simple." But Diego could see that Mrs. Beatriz could barely focus her gaze on the document. She was clearly under the effect of heavy medication. It was then that he made a decision that would change everything. Diego could no longer stand still. He saw an elderly woman being clearly manipulated by her own children, and his conscience wouldn't allow him to simply leave. But how to intervene without seeming like an intruder? The answer came when he remembered a detail from the delivery. One of the medications had a special note: "Administer only under medical supervision." It was the perfect excuse. He returned to the main entrance and rang the doorbell again. Marina answered through the intercom, visibly irritated. "What is it now?" "Sorry to bother you again, but I need to speak with you. It's about the medications. There's an important observation I forgot to mention." There was a pause. Diego could hear a muffled conversation on the other side. "What observation?" Marina finally asked. "It's better if I explain in person. It's about the dosage of one of the medicines. It could be dangerous if administered incorrectly." Another pause. Then the door opened. Marina was visibly annoyed. "What's this about? You're not a pharmacist." "No, but the pharmacy asked me to pass along important information." "Can I speak with Mrs. Beatriz?" "It's about her medication. My mother is resting. You can tell me." "Actually," Diego said, trying to sound as professional as possible, "the pharmacist was very specific. It needs to be directly with the patient, for safety reasons." Marina hesitated. Diego could see the internal struggle on her face. "She's not well enough to receive visitors," she finally said. "Then maybe I should call the pharmacy and ask them to send a pharmacist here," Diego suggested. They were very concerned about this dosage issue. The mention of the pharmacy and a pharmacist seemed to convince Marina. She sighed irritably. "Fine, but only 5 minutes, and I'll be present." Diego nodded. It was all he needed. Marina led him to the living room where Mrs. Beatriz was. Diego was shocked to see her up close. The lady was clearly disoriented, her eyes glazed, her hands trembling. On the table in front of her, a pile of documents waited to be signed. "Mother," Marina said, "the delivery man needs to speak with you about the medicines." Mrs. Beatriz looked up with difficulty. "Hello, young man," she said in a weak voice. "Sorry, I'm not seeing very well today." Diego felt his heart tighten. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Beatriz. I'm Diego from the pharmacy. I came to talk about your medications." She smiled vaguely. "How kind. You know, I'm confused with so many new medicines. Before I only took vitamins now." "Mother," Marina interrupted, "the man doesn't have time to chat. Talk about the dosage," she said, looking fixedly at Diego. Diego took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Actually, Mrs. Beatriz, I came here because I'm worried. You're taking a combination of medications that could be dangerous, especially if you're signing important documents." The silence in the room was total. Marina turned pale. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tense. Diego looked directly at Mrs. Beatriz. "Are you lucid enough to understand important contracts? Because I see you have documents to sign here." Mrs. Beatriz seemed confused. "I'm trying to understand these papers, but my head is so confused." "It's a simple power of attorney," Marina said quickly. "Nothing major." "Power of attorney for what?" Diego asked. "That's none of your business," Marina shot back, becoming visibly nervous. It was then that Ricardo entered the room. He was a man of about 40 years old, expensive suit, arrogant expression. "Who is this guy?" he asked, looking at Diego with suspicion. "It's the medicine delivery man. He was just leaving," Marina said quickly. But Diego didn't move. "Actually, I was explaining to Mrs. Beatriz that the combination of medications she's taking can affect her judgment capacity. Maybe it's not a good idea to sign important documents at this time." Ricardo approached, threatening. "Listen here, boy. You're not a doctor. You're not a lawyer. You're nothing. You're just a delivery man. I suggest you do your job and leave." "You're right," Diego said calmly. "I'm just a delivery man. But I'm also a human being, and I can't stand by and watch an elderly woman being manipulated." The atmosphere in the room became tense instantly. Ricardo took a step forward, but Diego didn't back down. "Manipulated?" Ricardo laughed with disdain. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is our mother, and that's exactly why you should be protecting her, not taking advantage of the mental confusion caused by the medications." Mrs. Beatriz, even in her confused state, seemed to sense the tension. "What's happening?" she asked in a trembling voice. Diego knelt beside her armchair. "Mrs. Beatriz, do you remember what medications you started taking recently?" She blinked several times, trying to focus. Marina said they were new vitamins. That would help with my blood pressure and sleep." "Mother, you don't need to answer," Marina interrupted. "Mr. Diego, you need to leave now." But Diego continued. "And did you feel confused before taking these medications?" Mrs. Beatriz hesitated. "No. I was driving, taking care of business, reading without problems." Her voice became clearer as she spoke. "I only started feeling like this in recent weeks. Coincidentally, when you started taking the new medications," Diego said. "This is ridiculous," Ricardo exploded. "Are you suggesting we're poisoning our own mother?" "I'm suggesting you're giving medications to make her confused enough to sign what you want." Marina and Ricardo exchanged a quick look, a glance that didn't go unnoticed by Diego. "Prove it," Marina challenged. Diego took out his phone and showed the screen. "I can call the pharmacy right now and ask which doctor prescribed these medications. Or better yet, I can ask them to explain exactly what each one does when combined." The silence that followed was deafening. "Mrs. Beatriz," Diego said softly, "would you mind if I call the pharmacy, just to clarify some things about your medications?" The elderly woman nodded vaguely. "If you think it's necessary." "It's not necessary," Ricardo said firmly. "This guy is inventing conspiracy where none exists." But Diego was already dialing. He put the phone on speaker. "Central Pharmacy, good afternoon. Hi, this is Diego. I made a delivery today to Mrs. Beatriz Oliveira. I wanted to confirm information about the medications." "Yes, I can help. Which doctor prescribed these medications?" There was a pause. "Let me check. It says here that the prescription was issued by Dr. Marcus Silveira." Diego looked at Marina and Ricardo. "Do you know Dr. Marcus Silveira?" Marina swallowed hard. He's Mother's new doctor." "And where is his office?" Diego asked the phone. "The address we have here is strange. It's a commercial address, not medical. Augusta Street, 1247, Suite 15. It seems to be an accounting office." Diego smiled coldly. "Interesting. A doctor who sees patients in an accounting office." Ricardo tried to grab Diego's phone, but he was faster. "Thank you," he said to the attendant and hung up. The silence in the room was heavy. Mrs. Beatriz looked from one to the other, trying to understand what was happening. "Ricardo," she said slowly, "who is this Dr. Marcus?" He's a doctor someone recommended, Mother. Specialist in what?" she insisted, and Diego noticed her voice was getting firmer. "Geriatrics," Marina quickly completed. Diego shook his head. "Mrs. Beatriz, when was the last time you were at this doctor's office?" The elderly woman frowned, concentrating. I don't remember going to any new office. Marina always brought the medicines home." "Because you were too weak to go out," Marina said quickly. "But I felt fine before the medicines," Mrs. Beatriz said, and her voice was definitely clearer now. "It's strange. I was feeling confused, but now, talking, it seems I'm becoming more lucid." Diego smiled. "Maybe because it's been several hours since your last dose of medications." Mrs. Beatrice's lucidity was clearly returning as the effects of the medications diminished. She looked at the documents on the table in front of her with an expression of growing suspicion. "Marina," she said with a firmer voice, "explain to me exactly what's in these papers." Marina exchanged another nervous look with Ricardo. "We already explained, Mother. It's a simple power of attorney." "Simple for what?" "I want to see the documents." Ricardo tried to intercept, but Mrs. Beatrice was faster, grabbing one of the papers. She tried to read, blinking several times to focus her vision. "Transfer of assets." She read slowly. "Renunciation of rights." "What is this?" "Mother, you're confused," Marina said, trying to take the paper back. But Mrs. Beatrice held firm. "No, I'm starting to become less confused, and this isn't a simple power of attorney. This is my entire inheritance." Diego approached. "Can I help you read, Mrs. Beatrice?" "Don't touch that," Ricardo shouted, but Mrs. Beatrice was already handing the papers to Diego. Diego read quickly, and what he saw horrified him. "Mrs. Beatrice, these documents transfer all your company's bank accounts and properties to Marina and Ricardo. Permanently." The elderly woman turned pale. "What do you mean permanently? They said it was temporary." "It clearly says here that you're permanently renouncing all your assets due to mental incapacity, due to senile dementia." Senile dementia?" Mrs. Beatrice repeated, incredulous. "I don't have dementia." "Mother," the doctor said. Marina began. "What doctor? This Dr. Marcus who sees patients in an accounting office?" Marina turned pale. "How do you know that?" "Because I heard the phone call," Mrs. Beatrice said, standing up from the armchair with more strength than she had shown in weeks. "And now I understand everything." Ricardo realized the situation was getting out of control. "Mother, you need to go back to taking your medicines. You're getting agitated." "I won't take any more medicines that you bring," she declared. "And you," she said, pointing to Diego. "Thank you for opening my eyes." Diego nodded. "You're welcome, Mrs. Beatrice, but I think we should call the police." "The police?" Marina screamed. "Why?" "Because what you're doing is a crime. Administering medications without legitimate medical prescription, manipulating an elderly person, fraud." Ricardo completely lost his composure. "You don't know what you're talking about. This old woman is really sick. She can't take care of business anymore." "Ricardo," Mrs. Beatrice exclaimed, shocked. "How dare you speak to me like that?" "It's the truth. You're becoming senile, forgetful. We're just trying to protect the family patrimony." "Protect for whom?" "For you," she shot back. "You always knew I planned to donate a large part of my assets to charity when I died. That's why you're trying to take everything while I'm alive." The silence that followed was revealing. Diego realized he had hit the sensitive spot. "That's it, isn't it?" he said. "You discovered you weren't going to inherit everything and decided to force the situation." Marina tried one last move. "This is ridiculous. We're her children. We have rights." "You have rights to what I decide to leave." Mrs. Beatrice cut her off. "And after today, that won't be much." Diego already had his phone in hand, dialing the police when he heard noise at the entrance. Cars arriving, doors slamming. "Mrs. Beatrice?" shouted a male voice from the entrance. "I'm here." The elderly woman smiled for the first time since Diego had arrived. "Dr. Henrique, I knew you would come back." A man of about 60 years entered the room, accompanied by 2 police officers and a woman in a suit. "Beatrice, thank God you're okay," he said, embracing her. "I received your message and returned immediately from my trip." "What message?" Marina asked, confused. Diego smiled. "The one I sent from her phone while you were distracted arguing." Ricardo tried to get up. "This is invasion of privacy." "Not when it's to prevent a crime," said one of the officers. "I'm Detective Santos. We received a report of abuse against an elderly person and fraud." Dr. Henrique looked at the documents Diego was still holding. "May I see this?" He read quickly, shaking his head in disapproval. "Beatrice, were you about to sign this?" "They gave me medications that left me confused," she explained. "If it weren't for this young man," she said, pointing to Diego, "I would have signed without understanding what it was." The woman in the suit introduced herself. "I'm Dr. Paula, prosecutor from the public ministry. Can we see these medications?" Marina tried to protest. but the police were already collecting the bottles. These medications don't have a valid medical prescription, Dr. Henrique observed after examining the labels. And the combination is extremely dangerous for an elderly person. It can cause mental confusion, temporary memory loss, and disorientation. That's exactly what they wanted, Diego said. The detective turned to Marina and Ricardo. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, Marina shouted. This is a misunderstanding. We were just trying to help our mother. Help by drugging her and stealing her assets. The prosecutor shot back. Mrs. Beatriz approached her children, her gaze sad but determined. Marina, Ricardo, I loved you all my life. I gave you everything you could want, education, opportunities, love, and you repaid me by trying to rob me and force medication on me. Mother, Marina tried, with tears in her eyes. No, you made your choice. Now I make mine. The police handcuffed Marina and Ricardo, who protested and made accusations while being taken away. With the police gone, the mansion finally fell silent. Mrs. Beatriz sat down again, visibly tired, but with eyes much clearer than when Diego had arrived. Dr. Henrique, she said, I need to do some tests to check if these medications caused any permanent damage. Of course, Beatriz. Let's take care of that immediately. She turned to Diego, who stood there, still somewhat shocked by everything that had happened. And you, young man, how can I thank you for what you did for me? Diego shook his head. You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Beatriz. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, they wouldn't, she said firmly. You risked your job, your safety, to defend a stranger. That's not common. Dr. Henrique agreed. Diego, right? What you did today was heroic. If you hadn't intervened, I prefer not to think about that, Diego said. What's important is that Mrs. Beatriz is okay. Mrs. Beatriz smiled. Tell me about yourself, Diego. What do you do besides delivering medications? Diego hesitated. Actually, I have a degree in business administration. I work as a delivery driver because the market is tough, but I hope to get something in my field soon. Administration. Interesting. She exchanged a look with Dr. Henrique. You know, I'll need someone trustworthy to help me with business. Someone honest, brave. Mrs. Beatriz, I can't accept, Diego began. Why not? I'm not offering charity. I'm offering work. You've demonstrated exactly the qualities I look for in a manager. Diego was silent for a moment. It was an incredible opportunity, but it seemed too surreal. Think about it calmly, she said. You don't need to decide now, but know that the offer is made. Dr. Henrique stood up. Beatriz, we need to go to the hospital for these tests. Of course. Diego, can you come with me? I'd like to talk more about this. During the trip to the hospital, Diego learned more about Mrs. Beatriz Oliveira. She owned a chain of pharmacies, ironically a competitor of the one that had made the delivery, and also had shares in several other companies. I built all this from scratch, she told him. My husband died when the children were small. Marina and Ricardo always had everything, but never wanted to really work. They always thought they were entitled to inheritance without earning it. At the hospital, tests confirmed that fortunately there was no permanent damage. The medications had only caused temporary mental confusion. You were very lucky, the doctor said. A few more weeks taking that combination and the effects could have been irreversible. Mrs. Beatriz held Diego's hand. It wasn't luck. It was providence. 2 days later, Diego was at the headquarters of Oliveira Pharmacy chain, signing his contract as administrative manager. The salary was 3 times what he earned as a delivery driver, but more important than that was knowing he was working for someone he respected. You'll start by visiting all the units, Mrs. Beatriz explained. I want you to know the business inside and out before taking on greater responsibilities. You can count on me. I won't disappoint you. I'm sure you won't. At that moment, the secretary entered the room. Mrs. Beatriz, there's a call from the prosecutor's office. It's about the case. Mrs. Beatriz answered the phone, and Diego could hear her side of the conversation. I understand. Yes, I'm certain of my decision. No, I don't want to drop the charges. That's right. When she hung up, Diego asked, Everything okay? Marina and Ricardo are trying to make a deal. They want me to drop the charges in exchange for formally renouncing any rights to the inheritance. And will you accept? Mrs. Beatriz was thoughtful. You know, Diego, they are my children. Part of me wants to protect them, but another part knows that if I allow this, I'll be sending the message that what they did was acceptable. The decision is yours, Mrs. Beatriz. No, I won't accept the deal. They need to face the consequences of their actions. 3 months later, Diego was in court, testifying about the events of that day at the mansion. Mrs. Beatriz was present, firm and lucid, telling the judge about what her children had tried to do. Marina and Ricardo from the defendant's bench looked at their mother with a mixture of anger and regret. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, this case shows how far greed can go. The defendants drugged their own mother, a 72-year-old woman, to force her to sign documents that would give them access to assets worth more than 50 million reais. The defense attorney tried to argue that the children believed they were acting in their mother's best interest, but the evidence was overwhelming. The medications were analyzed and confirmed to have no valid medical prescription. The so-called doctor, Marcus, was actually an accountant friend of Ricardo's who had forged the prescription. The victim, the prosecutor continued, was only not completely deceived because an ordinary citizen, in the exercise of his profession as a delivery driver, noticed something was wrong and had the courage to intervene. When Diego was called to testify, he told exactly what had happened, from the moment he made the delivery until the police arrived. You had no obligation to get involved, the judge observed. Why did you decide to interfere? Your Honor, I saw an elderly person being clearly manipulated. How could I just walk away? The judge had no doubts. Marina was sentenced to 8 years in prison for criminal organization, fraud, and abuse of the elderly. Ricardo received 10 years for the same charges plus document forgery. What the defendants did, the judge said during sentencing, represents one of the vilest forms of violence that committed against those who should be protected by those who should protect. Mrs. Beatriz showed no emotion when the sentence was read. She just held Diego's hand and whispered, "Justice was done." Diego was in his office at company headquarters, now with the title of Operations Director, when Mrs. Beatriz entered with a folder in hand. "How are last quarter's numbers?" she asked. "Excellent. We grew 15% compared to last year." "Great. And how are you feeling in the new position?" Diego smiled. A year ago, he was just a delivery driver. Today, he managed one of the largest pharmacy chains in the state. "It still feels like a dream sometimes." "Well, it's real, and well-deserved." She placed the folder on the desk. "Diego, I need to talk to you about something important." "Of course. What is it?" "I'm thinking about gradually retiring, and I'd like you to take over as president of the company." Diego nearly fell off his chair. "Mrs. Beatriz, I don't know if I'm prepared for that much responsibility." "Of course you are. In 1 year, you've transformed this company. The pharmacies have never worked so well. Employees respect you, customers are satisfied. But there are no buts. You saved not just my life, but my dignity. You showed me that there are still good people in the world. This company couldn't be in better hands." Diego was silent for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what was being offered. "What about your children? They'll get out of prison in a few years." Mrs. Beatriz shook her head. "Marina and Ricardo made their choices. They lost the right to participate in family business the moment they tried to rob me. Don't you miss them?" "I miss the children I thought they were, not what they really are." 6 months later, Diego was officially president of Oliveira Pharmacy Chain. Mrs. Beatriz maintained an advisory role, but rarely interfered with operational decisions. In a simple ceremony at the office, she handed him the symbolic keys to the company. "Diego," she said before the assembled employees, "when you entered my life, I was about to lose everything, not just my assets, but my dignity, my autonomy, my very identity. You saved me." Applause echoed through the auditorium. "But more than that," she continued, "you showed me that family isn't just blood. It's loyalty, it's respect, it's genuine love. Today, you're not just my successor in business. You're the son I wish I'd had." Diego felt his eyes water. In his 29 years, he had never imagined being recognized this way. "Mrs. Beatriz," he said into the microphone, When I made that delivery over a year ago, I was just doing my job. But what I found here was a family. You didn't just give me a job, you gave me a new life. 3 years passed. Oliveira chain became the largest pharmacy chain in the state under Diego's management. Mrs. Beatrice, now 75 years old, lived comfortably in her mansion, frequently visited by Diego and his family. He had married and had a young son. One day, Diego received an unexpected call. It was Marina, who had been released from prison on parole. "Diego, this is Marina Oliveira." "Marina, how did you get my number?" "I looked it up through the company. I wanted to talk to you." Diego hesitated. "About what?" "About my mother." "How is she?" "She's fine." "Why don't you call her directly?" Because I'm ashamed. What we did was unforgivable." "It was." "Diego, I know you must hate me." "I don't hate you, Marina, but I don't trust you either." "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I regret it. Every day." Diego was silent. Could you tell her I asked about her?" "I can. Thank you." And she hung up. Diego told Mrs. Beatriz about the call that same night. She listened in silence, showing no emotion. "And what do you think I should do?" she asked. "It's not for me to decide, but can I give my opinion?" "Of course. I think Marina is genuinely sorry, but that doesn't erase what she did. If you decide to forgive, let it be for you, not for her." Mrs. Beatriz nodded. "You're right. Maybe someday I'll be ready to talk to her, but not now." "And Ricardo?" "Ricardo never showed any remorse. He chose his path." 2 months later, Mrs. Beatriz authorized Diego to arrange a meeting with Marina. It was a tense meeting, full of tears and apologies. "Mother," Marina said, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I regret it every day." "Marina," Mrs. Beatriz replied, "you'll always be my daughter, but trust is something you earn once and lose forever." "I understand. Don't expect to return to the company. Diego is my successor and he deserves that place." Marina nodded. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I understand why you chose Diego to be your son." Epilogue. Years later. 10 years passed since that fateful day. Diego, now 39 years old, had expanded the company to other states. Mrs. Beatriz, at 82 years old, lived her final years surrounded by the care of her chosen family. On a Sunday morning, she woke up for the last time. Diego was by her side, holding her hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. Thank you, Mrs. Beatriz, for giving me a family." She smiled and closed her eyes in peace. At the funeral, Marina appeared. She had rebuilt herself, worked as a nurse, and seemed to have found her way. She approached Diego after the ceremony. "Was she happy in recent years?" she asked. "Very happy," Diego replied, "and proud of the man you became." "That's good. That's all I wanted to know." In the will, read a week later, Mrs. Beatriz had left everything to Diego, with a small amount for charity and a letter for Marina. "My dear daughter," the letter said, "I hope you have found your way. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. I forgive you, but I hope you've learned from your mistakes. Be happy." Diego kept the letter and looked out the window of his office. Outside, a young delivery driver parked his motorcycle and checked an address on his phone. Diego smiled. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with the simplest gestures, and sometimes doing the right thing changes not just one life, but many. The end.